Joining us now on the broadcast is Rajiv Malhotra. He needs no introduction. He sat with us many times before. He's a voracious author, a strong patriot, and a person who is unabashed about his opinions on global affairs and affairs in India. Rajiv ji, let me ask you the first basic question and flip it around. Why do you think Kamala Harris and the Democrats lost?
Well, thank you for inviting me, and namaste, and good morning to everybody. Kamala Harris lost because the Democrats lost touch with the American grassroots. They're too elitist, too arrogant, and Kamala Harris was actually never really won the primary. When they talk about threats to democracy, one of the principles of democracy in the United States is that you win the primary before you become a nominee, and it's not some party elders who appoint you because they like you. So this was a side deal, which was not even in the spirit of democracy. But actually, Kamala Harris lost because she is inexperienced as a national leader in global affairs. She was unwilling to answer questions on whether Americans are better off now than they were 4 years ago. She had no position on immigration, the border dispute, the economy, and so on and so forth. So a weak candidate. Plus, what you have to understand is that the American public are fed up. It was an anti-incumbency election because people felt that they are unhappy with the state of affairs in the United States, both in their own pocketbook, in terms of safety and security in the streets, their perception of America's position in the world, which has gone down. So overall, people felt it's time for a change. And the interesting thing is that Donald Trump has a lot of baggage. And a lot of people said we don't like him as a person, which means that when you vote somebody of that kind, whom in terms of personal character you don't necessarily like, it means you have to be very desperately against the other option.
Okay.
So it was a campaign of not liking one candidate and not liking the other candidate even more.
Okay.
So I think that's.
So I have to ask you now. It's difficult for the rest of the world to understand this because how we define right and left politics in India is completely different from how it's defined in America. For example, if we say that there is a right of center government in India, that right of center government is not discussing abortion and it's promoting women's right, it's promoting electric vehicles and environmentalism. So it's not the same. But there's the concept of wokeism. What is this concept and how does it actually play in an electoral cycle in the United States?
So this is a very important point, and a whole lot of my work is on this only. Wokeism is Marxism reborn, where they brought in not just economically underprivileged people as the oppressed, but also racially people, religious people, LGBTQ people. So it's a coalition where the traditional left have brought in Muslims as oppressed people, brought in blacks as oppressed people, brought in LGBTQ people as oppressed people. So it's a coalition of all these so-called oppressed. And the thing from Indian point of view is they've also brought in Dalits to fight against India, to fight against Hindus as part of the wokeism, and Khalistanis and Kashmir separatists. So when you go to these conferences in the liberal arts, in the Ivy Leagues, you find that a whole lot of these pro-Khalistan people, I go to these places and I'm surprised that at the welcome they're given, both in the academic world, they're given a lot of welcome, and also in some of the government-run think tanks and so on and so forth. So the progressive wing of the Democratic Party have become woke, and they are totally anti-India. They voted so many times to get sanctions against India and so forth. So as an Indian American and as a Hindu American, I'm relieved. Not that Trump's a great guy in his personal life and character and so on, but in the sense that at least we'll have an opportunity to reinvent a relationship between India and the United States, and that'll help the Indian Americans.
Okay, so Rajiv ji, let me post a straightforward question to you. Many people believe, and I'm one of them, that no way in heck is Justin Trudeau running the global campaign that he is currently trying to paint the Indian administration as a gunslinging gung-ho organization committing murder all over the world without tacit nods and wink from the American state. Do you suspect that is now going to change?
Yes, I was in fact going to say, if you were to ask me what are some opportunities for India, one of the important opportunities for India is Trudeau is hating Trump. He's very open about it. And I think India should close ranks with the Trump administration on this whole issue of Khalistan, both as far as the Canadian policy is concerned, as far as the US administration policy is concerned. India should basically, Trump is a very pragmatic guy. It's not idealism and all that stuff. It's about what's good going forward rather than worrying about the past. So India has to say that you have your issues and you go after your terrorists in foreign countries and kill them and whatnot. You know, we're not going to confess anything, but we do not want this matter to come between us. Let's close this whole investigation and inquiry on this Khalistan issue. And we would like the United States to go after the Khalistani terrorists, label them, call them terrorists like we call Islamic terrorists for who they are. So India has to put this on the table, both the Khalistan issue and the Kashmir separatist issue and all this Dalit separatism, these kind of separatisms that come out of India, India should take this up with Trump and his entire cabinet, whether it is Elon Musk or Vivek Ramaswamy or J.D. Vance, all these kind of people. They are totally anti-woke. This is a very, very big deal for India and an important opportunity window.
Okay, so what's then the implication or the messaging that we've just learned from a minuscule but important Indian American and a Hindu American community, and you're a part of both?
So I think that the messaging should be the Indian government has to now take on a more assertive stand on the issues facing the ones I mentioned, in exchange for you're helping the United States in the Indo-Pacific against China and things of that sort, which are also, by the way, in India's own interest, but more in the American interest, because India could play it both ways with China now. So in exchange for that, India should put some very clear things on the table. One is that this whole thing that happened in Bangladesh was a bad idea. It was Clinton Foundation is very close to Yusuf, who is the new president, the head of the Bangladeshi government. And, when they talk about threats to democracy, this is a threat to democracy because they ousted a democratically elected prime minister because they didn't like her policies. Whatever the issues were, they should have, if they had problems with her, they should have used domestic courts and domestic elections to get rid of her, not this kind of a way. But the Clintons pulled some strings and they put in their own man. And they have killed thousands of Hindus there. And Trump on Diwali made a very courageous and a very remarkable statement supporting the Hindus in Bangladesh and denouncing all the things that have happened against the Hindus in Bangladesh. This is a very important opportunity for the Indian delegation here to come and start getting close to the US forthcoming presidential delegation, the forthcoming Trump administration. Not only Trump personally, he's important, but a whole lot of other people who are around him are also very important, and this is a good window in the next 30 days.
Let me for our viewers put that into context. An election is held in Bangladesh. An incumbent government wins the election with whatever ifs and buts that the rest of us would want to do or not want to do. That incumbent prime minister happens to travel to China, spends 10 days there. As soon as she comes back, within a month, protests that were non-existent start. And within 2 weeks, the government is gone and she is in some sort of political asylum living here in New Delhi. And the man whose last paycheck was from the Clinton Foundation starts to head the country. And this is not supposed to be suspicious coming from the world's paragon of democracy. Makes you think, because the same institutions tell us that Indian democracy and religious freedom and press freedom is worse than Afghanistan. That's the last I checked. So that's the context here. But I have a couple of more questions before I let you go, Rajiv. I know our time is limited. I have to ask you on China. Now, in the past 1 week, we have seen miraculously that the India-China border issue has ended in handshakes. Where do we go from here?
So I think you have to see the Chinese are very smart. They know that a lot of people sense the Trump victory. For example, the Las Vegas gambling people and Wall Street, they all said that Trump is probably going to win in spite of all the polls and so on. So Chinese wanted to hedge their bets, and also Sundar Pichai of Google, who traditionally they've been anti-Trump, they started calling him. So Chinese have thrown this opportunity to India to bring India a little bit more neutral or towards their side. And I think India has done the right thing and saying, okay, we want to be friendly with everybody. We have great relations with the United States. Let's make them better, but not at the cost of Russia. I would certainly like India to continue a very strong relationship with Russia. because whatever the previous US government's problems were with Putin, I think Trump is going to put them behind, and India might even want to play a role in Ukraine, because Trump will want to settle this whole Ukraine fight, and India may be a kind of a win-win, face-saving, because everybody can say, okay, the neutral country, we didn't give in, and India could play some kind of a deal. I think Modi would be very good for that, and I would encourage India to do that. As far as China is concerned, India should use this opportunity for good diplomacy, but be strong, be firm. Don't just assume that they are not going to attack you one day and they're not going to pull a surprise, because you don't know that. Okay. I think it's like Reagan used to say, trust but verify.
Okay, so last question, sir. Iran, Ukraine, Israel. Does something change? I mean, it's not easy to come out of this even if you want to.
Yes. I think that the US policy on Iran will become tough again, because this was relaxed by the Biden administration, and now they're fighting the same people that they gave them tens of billions of dollars to settle old problems and remove the sanctions and whatnot. It didn't work. Pacifying them and hugging them and trying to turn them into a democracy and well-behaved backfired on the United States. So I think Trump is going to tighten the screws on Iran and also support the Israelis more assertively. And bring in, one of the things that Trump was doing is bringing the Saudis and the UAE people on the American side. And this was very unpopular, because the Saudi crown prince was supposed to have killed this guy, this Washington Post journalist and all that. But Trump said that something more strategic is at stake. We need to bring them on our side against Iran. And I think that was working. And that kind of a negotiation will resume, so that the Saudis and a few other Arabs will probably have good relations with Israel if they can make that breakthrough and isolate Iran as the culprit. So you will see tightening the screws on China, tightening the screws on North Korea, tightening the screws on Iran, and becoming better with Russia. I think that's kind of the foreign policy shift that you might expect.
Okay, Rajiv Malhotra, clear, sharp and unabashed as always. For those of you who want to read his books, you can Google him and find them. He's written on all these highly controversial topics. Thank you for joining us on this telecast.